I'm at Ledgemere. I woke up this morning and there was some snow on the ground. Thankfully it's still kind of early and it doesn't stick too much right now, but it's still kind of a miserable experience out there. The roads were slick and it's just one of those days. But it's just a sign of what's here to come. And when I went outside today, seeing the snow and the Christmas lights and all the holiday decorations, it gave me an idea of, you know, Christmas ideas. Not for me, I've already got what I need mostly, but for you, when you are running a homestead or a small farm, there's a lot of top 10 lists out there. And was it David Letterman that started those top 10 lists? Well, I don't think there's actually a top 10 list for tools for a farm, because there's different kinds of farms and there's different needs, different applications. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through a couple of my work areas and show you some things that I use, why I need them, and maybe there's some things that you need as well. I'm going to premise this whole conversation with the fact that my father was a master cabinet maker and my oldest brother was a carpenter. So as soon as I was tall enough for my hammer holster to quit cutting a furrow in the dirt when I was walking, I've been acquiring tools. And I remember as a kid, I would always, on my Christmas list, we get the Sears catalog, right? So we'd go through all that, but we also got in the mail a Sears Craftsman tool special, and it was like this thick with all the tools in it. And so at a very early age, that was one of the things I wanted for Christmas, was tools. So we're gonna just walk around real quick. I'm gonna show you a few things that I have, and I want you to understand that I'm almost 50 years old and I've spent 45 years collecting tools. So if you're just starting out, you're not gonna get all these things today, but they're just something to keep in the back of your mind as you progress with your farm. So without me talking anymore, I will start with what I've got. Hopefully this is a little bit better viewing experience for you. I've got an updated camera and microphone, so I'm hoping all these things will help. So let's get started. One of the things that I have, and they're a little pricey, and the driver's in the house, but DeWalt makes, and this is an old one, this is an 18 volt. They have some new ones now, but they have this drill driver kit, and in it, when I say drill driver, that's actually a complete battery tool set, and it came in a case. So I had the drill. It's a variable speed reversible drill, cordless. It came with a skill saw, and these are great for a few cuts. You're not going to go build a house with it because you would not have enough battery capacity to do it. But if you're just, you know, fixing the chicken coop real quick and you have some cuts to make, this makes nice straight cuts. The one thing that's weird about it, your typical skill saw, the saw's on the other side, and I guess because it's a battery motor, the saw blade's on the opposite side. So that takes a little bit getting used to initially, but after a while it'll be second nature. And it comes with a Sawzall, and there's a lot of different names for it. Reciprocating saw, I don't know, you can call it a million things. But a Sawzall, you can get different kinds of blades for it. This one's a wood blade, but you can get the bi-metal, the metal blades, which are great for demolition. And I use those metal cutting blades. All the time. I can't tell you the number of rusted, corroded bolts that you're not in a million years going to get those off. And so a Sawzall with some different blades are very invaluable. This isn't going to make nice, straight, clean cuts. You can see this one's got a wee-wah to it. You're going to hit something, and you know, if you just want to demo something, chop something off, this is your guy. If you want nice clean cuts and you're doing some finish work, this is your guy. Now understand, the last time I priced these, you were looking at around $700 or $800. So it's one of those things that's worth saving up for. If you piecemeal it, you know, it's like everything. If you piecemeal it, this thing and that thing, and they come with just a bare tool, no battery, you gotta buy a charger. If you buy the whole thing, yeah, it'll run you near $1,000 probably, but it's all there and you have all of it. This is an angle grinder, and it's pretty worn down now. I actually have a couple of these. I have a corded one that I have a brush on it, a wire brush, and that's really what I use mostly for stripping rusty metal. And then I have this guy right here for sawing steel. You can cut bolts off with it on the end if you don't have your reciprocal saw nearby. You can grind things down. Super handy. I have a few of these too. These are like your little boxes of Sawzall blades, and so you can see there's a bunch of different ones in here, different lengths. So it's one of those things where you get the right length for the job. If you're in a tight space, you don't want the long one, because as soon as you take that one time and you bounce it off something heavy, that's going to happen, and it's just never going to work right again. So put these back, and then I'll show you some more things. Belt sander. This is just the one I picked up at Walmart, I think probably about 20 years ago too. You don't really need to get anything super fancy. You don't even really need one of these to start with, but if you're doing a lot of finish work, this is kind of handy to have. You're going to need some drivers to go with your impact gun. Down here, I'm going to pull out some of these things. I got drill bits, and I got used to these. These are Hewitts, made in the USA. These drill indexes, and these are the same ones the military uses, and you can find these online. They pretty much last forever. You're going to need some ways to make bigger holes than what your drills are, and these are great for going through walls to run like. Well, the perfect example with these are when I was running PEX tubing through the barn, and to go from stall to stall to stall to put the waterers in. This is what you need to get through that. You can also get these right here, and they have concentric saws. These work best on a drill press. Right there. They don't work so great on a hand drill, because a lot of times if you're off just a hair, you end up with a weird looking hole. So drill press those is the best way. This right here is a giant saw, and this right here is for when I have to install light fixtures. I need you to understand also that this house was built in 1840. There was no power here until 1968, and there was one outlet. And then there was a previous owner here who was not an electrician and did a terrible job. And so there's an 80-year-old retired electrician that has taken me on as his apprentice here. So a lot of the wiring had to be redone. And your situation is going to be different than mine, but maybe not. Maybe you bought an old house and you're trying to restore it and run a farm at the same time. So I just can't give you a top 10 list of things that you should have, because like I said, everything's different. I have a couple of these corded drills, because sometimes you're just going to be drilling for a long time, and the reason I got this one in the first place, I'll tell you why, was because I was making maple syrup, and the sap came down the hill into a holding tank, and then I had to pump it up into another tank up overhead, and the reason that was like that was because the slope didn't work out. So this had a little pump on it that goes on your drill, and so it would pump the water up. That worked really well for a long time. Sometimes you just need a really big drill because you're drilling some really big holes, and the bit, half-inch drill, will take a lot bigger drill bit and has a lot more oomph for going through, let's say, I don't know, a beam like this. Basically, this old house was built with logs. Okay, you got to remember, back in 1812, before the Revolutionary War, these were all king pine trees here. So the king pine trees, they were marked with the king symbol, the King of England, King George, and they were brought down to Portland, and were used to make ships. So all around here, there's these really straight, giant pine trees that have reseeded themselves. And so we've got second, third, fourth generation pine trees. And they would build their houses with them. They would just take an adze or an axe and square it off as best they could. So you'd have a butt of a tree, and then as to get to the end of the beam, it would come in like this. So this old house has got some crooks in it, but I digress. Big drill for big old beams. And hemlock is one of those woods that it's very easy to work with initially, but once it dries, it's like trying to drill through concrete. So I have a few drills in here, and you just acquire things over time. Now, my shops look like a disaster. I know where everything is. I know a lot of people have giant, great big, beautiful shops and everything's on pegboard on the wall, and that's just not how it works here. You know, I've been to a lot of working farms over my life, and it's very rare that you would find a workshop that's just impeccable. My brother, who is a carpenter, is like one of the few exceptions. Everything has its place, and it reminds me of when I was in the military. Like every drawer had cutouts, and then you put the tools back, and on the pegboard on the wall there were outlines. I just can't do that here. I've got all kinds of different sanders, sandpaper. This right here is a Saber Saw, and so Sears Craftsman, people will crap on Sears, but back in the day, in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, they actually made pretty decent tools. And my dad basically only had Craftsman, Foley bell saw. There was a couple others that I forget now, but the old ones, they just don't die. And so this right here is got a guide on it. You can change the way, see it's sawing sideways right here, and then when you look at this right here, you can flip this right here and change it. So I have a bandsaw, which I'll show you in a moment, but when you're making small cuts and you have to be making circles, this makes really nice circles or arched cuts. Glue gun, invaluable. Stuff's gonna break, and having a glue gun on hand, they don't cost that much and they're super handy. A Dremel tool or a rotary tool with the bits. Sometimes you need to make tiny holes in plastic, or you need to get fine in something. You can even sharpen your chainsaw with this. I think it was actually listed as a chainsaw sharpener, but it's just a Dremel, and it takes all the Dremel tools, and you can do all the Dremel stuff. Look behind me, and yeah, I've got stuff strewn over a few different work areas. It's mostly in areas where I'm going to use them, so I kind of lump things together. When you have an old house or a farm or whatever, you're gonna need a whole bunch of basic carpentry tools, and there's different kinds of wrecking bars, crowbars. You're going to need an assortment of those for different things. I even have the old school hacksaws. These right here were the Wonder Bars by Stanley, and I remember buying my first one in the 1980s, and these right here are the best thing for pulling nails out of shingles, popping shingles up, just getting into everywhere. You can pull. It's got little. You can see how it's egg shaped. The nail head goes in there, and then you can pull it up, and you got the rocker on here. Invaluable to have a few of these kicking around. Different nail pullers. You're gonna need a few levels. I have 4-foot levels, torpedo levels, 2-foot levels. I like the metal ones better. The plastic ones, they warp a little bit. The metal ones, yeah, you can ding them up, but I like the old school Stanley metal ones. Rubber mallet. You know, if you're doing some finish work, and I demonstrated in one of my videos, you can take a block of wood and pound on it. But there's a lot of instances where you need to pound on something and move it, but you don't want to gack it all up. So rubber mallets, those are super handy. Compressor of some sort. I had a wheeled one that I think had a 5 or 6 gallon tank that I sold and bought this one. The reason I bought this one is because it's so much easier to take it in the house and do some construction in there. And to the right is a drop tank. So let's say I've got a flat tire way down back. I can either go down there and take the tire off, bring it up and fix it, or I can put air in the drop tank, put it in the gator, drive way down back, pump the tire up, and then it'll be enough to get me back generally. A generator, if you live in areas where you're prone to lose power or you don't have power where you're going, portable generator, super handy. And this is the second one I've owned in my entire life, and it just seemed to last forever, but you do need to exercise them, and that's a whole nother topic. But a generator is kind of a novelty. You won't use it a whole lot, but when you do need it, you need it, and I've had this one forever, and so it's just one of those things that I do use. I hoard screws. I've got 3 or 4 different drawers of screws here. I've got pretty much every screw you could ever want, and that's because I don't want to run to the hardware store every 10 minutes. Nails, extension cords, you're going to need some good cords, and we'll talk about some of those in a moment. My Electrician Tool Set, and so I've got pretty much everything I need to do electrical. I've got testers, screwdrivers, pliers, bits and pieces of conduit, pieces of wire, and I've got tons of wire, all the outlet jacks, and plug for what kind of outlets. I always buy hospital grade outlets. They hold up, and they're the best. So don't buy the cheapest one on the shelf. Buy hospital grade cords. But what I am trying to show you is right there. You're going to need some hammers. That's a 2-pound hammer, and I've got a couple of those kicking around because that's for beating on the big stuff. Cutters, all the different nuts, bolts, washers, etc. Wire brushes. Or to go buy all your sockets at once, at least get yourself one of these. Now these blow molded cases, I love them and I hate them because the sockets sometimes will stay in and sometimes they don't. But this has the 3/8 and 1/4 inch with a couple of combination wrenches, and you've got your metric and standard sockets and a little bit of deep sockets. Some sort of mobile light that you can take with you. You can get the battery operated ones, the rechargeable ones. This one's a corded one. It's actually my favorite, but I do have this one here that you charge up and you can take with you, and that works for a while. You need jacks. This is a battery charger, engine starter. This right here is one of my most used tools as well. This is a Lincoln battery operated grease gun with this on the end, the lock and lube. And I don't generally fall for the stuff on the internet, but this has been a lifesaver because what you do is you squeeze this, it goes out like that, you put it on the nipple of your grease zerk, let go, put your grease in, and then this breaks it loose. Because what happens with the old style, is that you take your grease fitting and you hook it on your grease zerk, and then it doesn't come off, so you have to get a screwdriver and pry it off. And if you're trying to get it out of the middle of your bucket loader, not real fun. So that lock and lube has been a real lifesaver. Style lever action grease gun. And the reason I have this is because it gets into a couple places I can't get my hand into with the other one. So like if you're trying to get up into your clutch housing of your tractor, the other one doesn't work so great, but that does. Bits of wire terminals, cotter pins, all that barn. And the reason I have woodworking tools out here is because I have a lot of space to work in, and I can take sawhusses, which I have here, and I can set them up on the threshing floor here, and I've got a great place to work for big things. And I've got the barn doors to get things in and out. And so I've got tons of boards. I buy boards as I need them and usually buy a few extra. So bandsaw, I've demonstrated in some of my videos why a bandsaw is great to have. Pad sander, this does your final sanding, so you can use like a belt sander like this or the one I showed you, and then you're going to want one of these with a fine grit sandpaper to do your final sanding. Some battery operated tools like a leaf blower, weed whacker. I've got a little battery operated chainsaw that's great for pruning trees because you're not going to lug a great big gas chainsaw up in the tree with you. Here's my big this right here is the one that gets pounded on and holds the big stuff. Table saw, that's an old one from the 70s or 80s. Works great for what I use it for. There's a wood vise there, so if you're doing some woodworking, you're not going to put your boards in that big bench vise, you're going to put them in a wood vise. Chop saw, this is just a small one. This is only I think this is a 10-inch chop saw. You can get them in 12-inch, I believe. This one's, I think the correct terminology for this is a compound miter saw, because I can go side to side, I can go angle, basically every direction that you can think of. That speed squares, combination squares, an old school radial arm saw, and this makes really good cutoffs. You can angle it side to side like the chop saw, and it works okay for that. But generally, if you've got big boards like 2x4s, 4x4s, boards bigger than say 8 inches or 10 inches wide, this right here is the turn to. And my dad bought that back in, I think, the late 70s or early 80s, and it still goes strong. The cool thing about the old Craftsman tools is they all had this little key in them. You can see this right here. You can pull it out and that'll lock it so kids can't get into it. There's one on there. And this one has one also on the front. So if you've got little kids, you can pull all those things off. And framing squares, that's what you're going to use to cut your rafters. Extra saw blades, and this out here is kind of like the catch-all. I've got extra tape measures, some screwdrivers, more tape measures, chisels, cutters for plexiglass, more chisels, torpedo levels. I used to have more C-clamps, but my kids took them and I don't know where they went. Up here is a router. And so if you're making like mitered edges, chamfered edge or a rounded edge, like the Roman or chamfered edge, that right there is what's going to make that for you. A blower, and that's what I use to clean the barn. It just gets out the hay chaff and the dust. You just kind of open the doors up and turn it on and blow all the stuff out the end. For clamping your wooden projects together. Stuff I can get with the blower, but if you can't, a good push broom, and there's different kinds of bristles on it. You got the stiff ones and the soft ones. In the barn on the rough floors, the rough ones or the stiff bristles are the best. If you've got like a nice hardwood floor or something, then you want the soft bristles. And over here we've got more wood clamps. These are the ones that slide up and down. So if you want a board that's wider than what you have, you just take your boards, you glue them together, and you use those clamps, and then you can make a wider board. It's great for making like tabletops and cutting boards, all those sort of things. Aluminum shovels. There's different kinds of them. I don't recommend ever buying a plastic one. They will shatter, particularly in the cold weather. They just don't work that great. The metal ones, and see this one here has got a plastic handle. Even I don't like that one very much. This one's actually mine. The kids use the other one, but it has a wooden and metal handle, so it just feels more solid. Manure fork, pitchforks, and the pitchforks obviously for moving the loose hay. It's the easiest way to move loose hay. You power wash the milk room, and the squeegee is what gets the water out. Step ladders, that's the short one. We've already talked about the importance of sawhorses. A couple of big old step ladders. The Black & Decker Shopmate, I think it's called, and it's got clamps on it and different ways to hold things. That doesn't get used a ton, but it's invaluable when I do need it. Really a useful tool for moving heavy things around the barn. Extension ladder. There's all kinds of different lengths available, and if you got to get up higher than what your step ladder can get to, you'll find that as a homeowner you're going to need one of those. Here are the 3M work tunes with all the loud equipment you got on a farm. Those right there are my go-to for hearing protection. That's important too that I forgot to tell you about. was the torch. I use MAP gas, it burns hotter, but that's great for heating up metal if you've got a bolt you're trying to get out, and sometimes you can't get it off with a impact tool, you can't cut it off, and so you have to heat it up, and so a torch with MAP gas is the way to go. This right here is a portable fuel tank. Take my truck, use the forks here, put it on a pallet, put it in the truck, go fill up with diesel, and then I'm not carrying 5-gallon cans trying to get my tractor fueled up. There's not a ton of things out here that I think you ought to have, other than a mower, obviously. I'm not going to restate the obvious on some things. Come along. This is for, sometimes you just need to move something and you can't get a tractor on it. You're not strong enough to move it. So a cheap come along, I think 2 or 3 like 10-foot chains, because that's what's going to pull out your trees and pull your tractors around when you're stuck. Some different kinds of funnels. Gas chainsaws. If you do any kind of wood cutting, you're going to need at least one of those. I like a couple, because if you get one stuck or one's down for the count, you got to back up. Bush cutters. These are like old battery chargers. They still work, that I've acquired. Post hole digger. I call that the goon spoons. I've got the auger that goes on the back of the tractor, but that's what you need to clean out your holes. And obviously, all your hand tools. Scuffle hose, my favorite hoe for the garden for weeding. Iron rakes, round shovels, leaf shovels, your square shovels. So a lot of this stuff you just acquire over the course of a lifetime. Old people pass away, friends are moving. The church has they call it a fair down there every year, and there's always like this white elephant bargain basement yard sale stuff, and they give away tools and hardware and all that stuff basically for pennies. So you go down there and spend 20 bucks and you come back with a wheelbarrow load of stuff. And that's actually something else that you need. A wheelbarrow, if you're cleaning out your barn, you can't get in there with a tractor, you need a wheelbarrow. And I recommend the bigger ones with the pneumatic tire, but get the no flat tire the first time your tire dies, because it's going to happen. And I also like the wheelbarrows with basins for your used motor oil. Some things are actually so low to the ground that you can't get to it with that, so I just took a 2.5-gallon jug, cut the bottom off, and use the garden hoses.
When you buy garden hoses, don't be fooled to get the cheap $6 one. Buy the one that's got the good brass fittings on it and is weather rated, and it's rated to have water in it under pressure all the time. A lot of the cheap green garden hoses, they're not designed for constant pressure, and so they'll fail after a little bit.
One of the last things I recommend is a good set of cameras to have on your property, just to keep an eye out when you're not there. The last thing we want is for somebody to come over and take all our stuff that we spent our entire life trying to buy, and then in an instant it's all gone and you don't live long enough to buy it all back. So if you can figure out who took it, that goes a long way. Some of the tools that I have, and like I said, it's been a lifetime of collecting. They all have a different purpose. Your needs may be different than mine, but there's just no way that I could compile that into a top 10 list. But I will say the one thing that everybody agrees upon that you have to have, without exception, is a knife. Now, people swear by multi-tools. I don't wear a belt all the time. If you wear a belt every day, a multi-tool in your little pouch is great. I like the Gerber ones because the smooth part's on the outside. The Leatherman, the smooth part's on the inside, so when you go to squeeze on it, you're actually pushing on the sharp edges. So I don't like Leatherman, I prefer Gerber. Gerber doesn't sponsor me, by the way. But honestly, as a kid, growing up in the 80s, I used to watch MacGyver, and if MacGyver can do it with a Swiss Army knife, so can I, and this has been true. I bet I have a whole drawer full of Swiss Army knives that I've accumulated over the years, and it's just a wonder tool. The blade is super sharp. You've got screwdrivers, and depending on what you get the scissors or the little wrench. But just something to keep your, in the back of your mind as you're building your farm, things that you will run across that you'll need. And like I said again, you're not going to go buy all these things today. And can I tell you what the priority is? I really can't. I can't tell you what the priority is because only you know, because only you are there. So like I said, hopefully this has been beneficial. I'll talk to you next time, and if you haven't already, please take a moment, subscribe to the channel, because I've got more great things to tell you. Thank you for watching, and have a great day.